We are most definitely on the move this week. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. This is our weekly recruiting and transfer portal update. We only have this show because of LeeAnn Herring and her contribution, of course, and she is on the move live from Houston today. Very nice.
We are live from Houston. Spring is in the air. March is officially here. Dead period is gone, Mark, but quiet period is in full force now. A little bit of movement is going on. Always a lot of rumblings for those who aren't familiar with the transition of dead period into quiet period. Quiet period does allow that prospects can visit campus, but coaches are not allowed to go on the road or be on the move visiting campuses. So potential prospects can go visit on college campuses, and of course communications. It's the time where you really want coaches and assistants, as the kids say, to slide into your DMs, because they can still keep up electronic communication, calling and texting. Of course, Mark, when I'm here in Houston, I have to stop at my favorite cigar shop. They've been so gracious to let us do a couple shows here at the Heights Cigar Shop. A lot to talk about. We spent most of that our winter time on the show, when we kicked off our segment, talking about a lot of names, and a lot of the storylines that we talked often about, Mark, was the fact that there was a lot of high caliber talent coming out of the transfer portal, but they just really didn't find their place and their footing. And now, as we begin spring, a lot of the names we're going to be talking about, are these guys going to finally be able to translate? We got a long list of transfers that we think are some names to watch in spring. And we also got a few young guys that you've heard us talk plenty about, especially at the quarterback position, that have enrolled early and are looking to make the best out of spring. And some of the young guys we're going to be talking about, it looks like the programs that they're heading and starting into their workouts, that there's a really good high caliber chance that they're going to translate. So let's get to it, talk about those guys who are going from transition and if they're going to translate this spring.
Folks, before we get fired up today, keep in mind that if you've got a product, a service, or a personal brand that you would like to feature here at the Voice of College Football, our partners are always satisfied, including currently Win Agency on the Michigan channel. So just hit us up at sponsorships@vocfb.com if you want to partner with us here at the Voice of College Football. All right, I got to say, LeeAnn, I looked at this list and I thought, wow, she went all over the country. This is a really good list of generally guys that have shown that they've got something. They've got something in the toolkit, but maybe they haven't broken through yet. And this may be like big season, huge season, breakout season. So first you went with Chase Soule, wide receiver, he's been all over the map here at this point. Colorado, East Carolina, now at Iowa State. And an interesting part here is that Iowa State had probably the best wide receiver tandem in the Big 12 in Jalen Knoll and Jaden Higgins last year. Both of those guys have moved on to the NFL. They combined for almost 170 receptions. So they need help at wide receiver. They get a guy who is the 8th rated wide receiver in the transfer portal in Chase Soule.
Like you said, Soule's been all over the place. Colorado definitely had a breakout time while at East Carolina before, heading to Iowa State. Like you said, losing a pair of 1,000 wide receivers, especially in the conference of Big 12, where Iowa State, definitely the Cyclones are looking to make a big push. And I really think Chase Soule's going to have a heck of a year. I think that this might be the time. There was definitely a need for a new option for Rocco Beck to be able to have, like we always say, everybody can't do it, unless everybody does their job. You can't stand on business. So I really think that for Iowa State, Chase Soule is going to be that guy that we're really going to look in heading into spring. That's going to be a really big impact, a top transfer impact for the Cyclones heading in. Like I said, monster time at East Carolina, really set his footing. But again, he's got big shoes to fill when the Cyclones, like you mentioned, Mark, not only lose one, but two 1,000-yard receivers. They definitely need someone to be able to amp that if they're going to be able to hang in the Big 12. But it looks like Chase Soule definitely could be the guy to help ease that transition and help Beck get some momentum going and get that mojo going down in Ames this season.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a good situation for him to get to because, as you mentioned, Rocco Becht, he's been the starter there now a 3rd season coming up in 2025. So he's well established, knows what he's doing, how to run the offense. Matt Campbell's an excellent coach. So Chase Soule finds a good home in Ames, Iowa. And as you well know, he was a top 150 prospect out of the state of Texas. When I say top 150, I mean in the state of Texas. They got so many players in the state of Texas. Top 150 in the state of Texas coming out of high school. I know, LeeAnn, you also are going to the top of the board here on this one, and there is much anticipation to see this guy in his spring game, Bryce Underwood at Michigan.
Well, I don't think there wasn't a recruiting segment these past couple, this fall heading into this December and everything with that 2025 class where Bryce Underwood was not mentioned. I know TJ and the guys over at the Michigan channel and the whole Michigan base here at the Voice of College Football is definitely excited. I know that even with potential high caliber talent as Underwood, there's always, I feel, that stigma that comes in, especially at the quarterback position, Mark, for these young guys going in, because we've seen it one too many times where we see Gatorade Players of the Year, high caliber 5 stars, Bryce Underwood, who are elite at the high school level, but can they make that jump? We know that Sharon Moore didn't really have his guy coming into this spring battle. But I think that Underwood, from this young set of quarterbacks, because this spring market, we'll be talking about some of them here in Slater list. There's a lot of early enrollees. There's a lot of these 2025 classes that are going to be going into some huge quarterback. But I think Underwood really sets himself up. And I think this is a kid, when you watch his film, as elite as he is, I think that he's already in that situation, that mind frame, especially again in Michigan. I think it's going to be a nice transition. He really is a special talent. And I think that he's going to help the Wolverines really go deep in the Big Ten. I know a lot of times, like I said, there's a lot of hesitation bringing in the young guys. Do they have that maturity? Is their skill set elite enough, especially in a program like Michigan with that high demand, to make a push in the thing? And I really do believe that Bryce Underwood is one of those guys at the QB that has the maturity, that has the skill set, that he's going to compete right out the jump. I really think that he's going to be the guy to watch this spring, and it will be interesting to see how he takes shape. But again, I think he brings a unique and special talent. And I think he's one of the few young guys that you want to take a chance on. I think Sharon Moore knew that coming out of the gate. His NIL deals and packages have been one to talk about. They definitely set the standards for a lot of these younger guys coming in, high demand. But for all the investment that Michigan is, I think that this is one that it's going to translate immediately. And at some point, I know that a lot of classes focus on getting guys at the transfer portal for their experience and maturity. But I also think at some point you got to take a risk and a chance. And if I'm Michigan and I'm Sharon Moore, it is clear that with the special talent that I think Underwood's going to bring this spring. So he's definitely one to watch for the Wolverines.
Yeah, I don't like to make comparisons, but my backflip is very similar to Bryce Underwood's. If you saw it on the highlight there, my backflip. Never mind. So anyway, the situation at Michigan is basically Davis Warren is a holdover from last year. Davis Warren had his struggles early in the season, was a much better player late in the season, and took some command of the offense, played really well against Alabama in the bowl game. And then they go out and get a transfer quarterback in Mikey Keene, who was a starter part-time at UCF, went to Fresno State, the two-time starter there for the past 2 seasons at Fresno State. 71% completion percentage for Mikey Keene last year, 18 touchdowns, 11 picks. He's thrown 65 touchdowns in his career. So they've got that veteran in place, or 2 veterans actually in place, where the conventional thought is they start with a veteran week 1, and maybe by week 4, week 5, Bryce Underwood's ready to go. Although there are some people that have said, man, we've seen these guys all work out together, and the other 2, they're capable power conference quarterbacks, but he's just, at another level. The ceiling is just so ridiculous. As long as he can grasp the offense, and obviously he's going to have a complete spring and August camp to do that and to display that it would be no surprise if Bryce Underwood was the starter for Michigan in week 1.
And I think the spring, especially having Underwood on campus early, it really helps to say, like you mentioned, when you got veteran guys bringing in a young guy like Underwood, we've seen a lot of high caliber programs, especially ones that are known to develop quarterbacks. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, we know what his method behind his bragness when he brings a young guy in to create competition. But again, I mention it, almost every show about when you have elite players, how do you separate yourself? And indeed, Underwood has found a way to separate himself. And there's a lot of people that, look at him in comparison. And like you said, when you see him in live reps, he's one of those kids that his talent translates onto the field. And I think that this will give him a big push. If anything, he may not be the starter, just because I believe that, they might allow the veterans to kind of ease into things and give him a transition. But again, I do believe that the special talent that he brings and everything that you had mentioned too will definitely be something to look at it. And I think that spring he will definitely be under the microscope. But Michigan Wolverine fans, if they aren't already excited to have him on campus, they definitely are going to be more excited to get to see more of his abilities translate this spring for the Wolverines.
Absolutely. And we go back to the transfer portal now for a guy that is looking to help Miami transition in the secondary. So this Miami defense made plays up front, but they got burned in the secondary time and time again. This past season, they've completely overhauled the secondary. Basically, now I know a couple of players are coming back in small roles, but basically they've overhauled the secondary. They've got a new defensive coordinator with Corey Heatherman coming in from Minnesota, where he did an outstanding job and led a top 5 defense. And one guy that they look to contribute coming in from Jacksonville State would be Zachariah Poyser.
Well, we know that the hype surrounding Miami obviously was on the offensive side of the ball, but we know that we won't get to see much of Carson Beck. But as you mentioned, and we've talked a lot about hitting into the portal, that one of the needs that Miami and the Canes were going to have to address was that secondary. While you have a lot of veteran talent, it is talent that has not produced. So I think that Zachariah Poser is going to really help. And I feel like the spring for Miami is definitely going to make that shift to focus largely on the Miami defense, because it has to be better, Mark. I mean, as much as you want to have a stout offense, and we know what Beck's going to bring when we see him in action, despite him not being a part of the spring workouts, we do know that in order to compete in the ACC and for Miami to really run, they were going to have to address that secondary. And I think that Poser really is one of the best fits that we saw this transfer cycle. We talk a lot about kids in the transfer portal who have immense talent that haven't found their footing. But also another key point that I think Miami addressed in this situation was not only finding a talented transfer portal in Zachariah Poser, but more importantly, a guy that will fit what the level and play and up the level and play for the Hurricanes. Because like you said, it was pretty straightforward that they needed a huge boost and bolster. And I think that it starts this spring with Poser in that backfield. But again, I think that he's one to watch for the Canes, but I think he's going to be an instant contribution in hopefully trying to ease a little bit and not just put band-aids, but try to again uplift that secondary that just was not pleasant to watch all season long in the ACC.
Absolutely. And now we move it on to a familiar name, because he's been all over the place in college football. And coming out of high school, Romello Height was at the top of the board across the board in regards to recruiting rankings. And he has certainly taken his tour when it comes to the SEC, the Pac-12 at the time, and played for Georgia Tech last year. And that's when Romello Height coming off the edge now for Texas Tech.
Well, Texas Tech, when it comes to the transfer portal, we know that Texas Tech not only has found a way and means to make their NIL something that's enticing, that's not being talked a lot about. I don't know if you were able to see it. I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, but now they have one of the highest graded facilities financially, a little over 252 million coming out. So there's a little bit more than red dirt going on in Lubbock that has a lot of talented players. And Edge Romello Height is one of those guys that has decided to take a chance. Like you mentioned, Mark, he's been all over the place, but he's going to bring a lot of one of the most talked about transfer portal classes is Texas Tech Raider history. There's definitely going to be a lot of guns up and a lot of guys at Texas Tech watching if Romello Height is going to be that guy. And I think he's going to bring a lot to this roster and help Texas Tech really try to make a big a run at that Big 12 crown. We've seen the conference itself not desolate, but definitely make a transition. As of course we know Texas A&M. I mean, Texas and OU have officially become part of the SEC. And of course, the Big 12 has a little bit of different feel. So I think that Texas Tech has really used not only its financial resource, but this transfer class to really build together something where they can make a run. And I think that as far as the defense and the secondary is concerned, Romelio Height is going to be that guy. I think he was just a huge pickup. And I think that he's going to what we always talk about as far as a defensive guy is just chaos. And Romelio Height from Georgia Tech and all the places that he's been, USC, Auburn, he not only brings a lot of experience that I think is going to help just make him that much better to that Red Raider defense, but he brings a lot of chaos. Quarterbacks were every place that he's stopped at, he has made it difficult for them. And we're not just talking about, the low key guys, the second and third string quarterbacks. We're talking about the big guys coming out of these programs. Romelio Height has just one of those internal radars. When you see him, when he sees it, he's on it, and he's not gonna separate himself until he gets it done. He's one that the Big 12 quarterback should fear, and Texas Tech is definitely going to get a good one here. And I'm excited to see what he does this spring down in Lubbock.
Absolutely. And he's a guy that's working on a sixth season now in college football. And again, a fourth team with Texas Tech. And we saw him in a couple premier games late in the season against Miami, and then that marathon 7 overtime game against Georgia. And if you look at the total numbers for a premier edge rusher, they're not what you would expect them to be. He's shown flashes. He's had really good games and really breakout games. And game-changing games, and then at the same time, he's been off the radar for week after week after week. So he's got to be a more consistent guy, and Texas Tech is obviously banking on exactly that. All right, going to the University of Florida, and I was just making this comment on a couple different shows this week, LeeAnn, that that the pulse at Florida has just completely gone in two different directions just in the last 4 or 5 months, because they went into November looking at a daunting schedule, a 5-game stretch that we all expected them to lose probably every game. And they came out of it at 3-2. They beat Ole Miss. They beat LSU. They finished 8-5 with a bowl win. And Billy Napier was a dead man walking at one point last season, leaving the field after a Texas A&M drubbing to boos and catcalls and fire Billy chants. And here the program seems to be in much better shape. They had a good transfer portal cycle. They didn't bring in a ton of players, but they brought in quality. And of course, DJ Lagway, the sky's the limit. And then he's got a running back in Jaden Baugh, who's obviously going to help the offensive consistency and explosiveness.
Talk about a team. You hit on all the points there, Mark, about, just a couple months ago, it seemed that Billy Napier was no longer going to be in Gainesville. There was a search going on. Would Lane Kiffin take the job? Would he take the bait? But long and behold, the Gators have made a huge transition. Everybody rallied. And when my boy DJ Lagway got in there, he really stood on business, as I like to say. But again, as talented as DJ Lagway is at quarterback for a young guy, kind of having to be thrown in there, has made a lot of strides and really elevated that program. But again, with the competitiveness of the Florida schedule, heading into this offseason, you cannot put it all on DJ Lagway despite his talent. And I really like the fact that they need to up that run game. And I think that bringing in Jordan Ball is really going to help DJ Lagway take a little bit of pressure off what DJ Lagway can do, because we know that when DJ Lagway gets himself in a situation, he's going to find a way. When there is a will, there is a way. But again, when you're competing in the SEC, when you're going to compete in the conference, you cannot just put it all on your star young guy. And I really think that this will help not only take the pressure off, but really open up that run game. As elite a passer as DJ Lagway is, we saw that in a lot of close games that really could have made different outside the Gators, it really did come down to the running game and having a strong running back. I think that, Lagway settling into the full giant, he's just going to bring a ton of upside to this ground game. He's going to open it up. I believe that he just has that kind of young, fresh talent that I think is going to be a compliment. We talk about the chemistry that quarterbacks have with their wide receivers, but they're also to have a stout run game, which we know that Florida definitely needs to have going into this offseason, going into that fall schedule, that they're going to need to bring someone with experience. But Jordan Ball, I believe, may have not had a huge impact where he was played a modest role, as they like to say. But I really think that he's going to make that second year leap. I think he's really going to push the limits, and I really like the potential of this run game down in Gainesville with DJ Lagway and Jordan Ball. I think that connection is going to be something. You got a lot of young and up and coming talent right there that has a lot of heavy weight. There's obviously a lot of pressure on that Florida program. People love you when you're winning. People love you when we've seen that time and time again. And Florida's definitely on the upside. But again, the hardest part for Florida now is trying to create an arsenal between its veteran talent, its young talent, and of course its transfer talent, Mark, to be able to stay on the upside of things and not go back into that revolving door. Well, Billy Napier could easily be back in the hot seat in Florida, be back in a dumpster fire. But I think Jordan Ball is really going to elevate the run game and really open up a lot for the Florida Gators this spring.
Kentucky's passing game was a bit of a dumpster fire last year, but the wide receivers really did not have a hand in that. We expected Kentucky to have one of the best wide receiver tandems in the SEC going into last season with Berrien Brown and Dane Key. And those guys certainly caught the football when it was thrown their way, but they had issues with, of course, Brock Vandegrift not fulfilling his potential at the quarterback position. He got benched at one point in the season, and Gavin Wimsatt, the incoming transfer from Rutgers, more a runner than thrower for sure. And so a guy like Dane Key sees a better opportunity at Nebraska, and Dylan Raiola is the guy that is going into his sophomore season that had his growing pains as a quarterback, as a true freshman in the Big Ten, but certainly should have a breakout and be much better this year. And he's got a go-to guy in Dane Key.
Dane Key, we knew when he was on the move that wherever he would settle in, Mark, when we first started talking about him hitting the portal, obviously you knew that he was elite, him and Berrien Brown when they touched the ball. But again, in Lexington, they just couldn't find any success as a Wildcat. And as you mentioned, the young quarterback Dylan Raiola really didn't have the opportunity. It takes a village for a quarterback as elite as him coming out of high school. We knew that he was really a huge talk. And when the Cornhuskers were able to grab him, we knew that he could do big things. But again, everybody's got to do their job. And Raiola had a difficult time, as you said, because he didn't have those wide receivers. But I see with the addition of Dane Key to this Cornhusker backfield that I think it's really going to open up. And I think we're going to see a lot of Raiola being able to have a go-to guy, like you said, with some strong chemistry. When Key was in the, obviously playing in the SEC, big numbers despite his Kentucky Wildcats not having a footing, 1,750 yards last year in the SEC. I think that Raiola, having his experience, having his ability, we know he's a big time playmaker, whether it's in the red zone, he's always key, he's always clutch. And I think that he will help Raiola become a better quarterback, and I think he will help him mature. And I really see that the Nebraska offense is going to take a much needed progressive step forward with this chemistry and addition. So I really like this combo. It's going to be interesting to see the veteran versus the young talent, the young guy, kind of like you said, star player coming out of high school, really, had all the hype behind him, but he really just didn't have the guys that he could throw to. So we really didn't get to see his potential. But I think him having Dane Key now in that backfield with his maturity, his experience, I think there's going to be a bright future down the road for the Cornhuskers.
Absolutely. And staying on the subject of big game changers at the wide receiver position, there is nobody or few players that can match the quick twitch of one Zachariah Branch, who's going from coast to coast to a certain extent, USC to Georgia.
He did find his way back home, of course, the Branch brothers. I don't think there was a show in December when they hit the transfer portal from the recruiting rumblings that we didn't mention the Branch brothers. And we definitely always were mentioning Zachariah Branch. Where would he land? Kirby Smart was able to land him and get him down to Georgia. I think this year, as though there was sparks, there was flashes of success in Georgia. Let's be real. They really lacked a reliability when it came to their wide receiver, and they needed to find a way. And Zachariah Branch, I believe, is going to be this guy when they were able to gain him, Mark. Him coming in ahead of spring camp, making that transition, I think is going to really help alleviate that problem that Georgia, really just never found a click, much like when they lost Bowers at tight end. They just never really found their footing again. But Kirby's smart, always finding a way in those big moments. But I think that, again, this is another situation where we're going to help see a lot more unlocked from the Georgia Bulldogs, having someone as elite as Zachariah Branch really find a way to make things happen this offseason. But again, I think that he's going to be someone to watch this spring. I think that he's going to create and spread the field, open a lot, have a huge, unique ability to really put Georgia in a stronger position to have more go-to guys that they can rely on, opening up their game and definitely giving them a dynamic, a better dynamic than we saw in 2024, that wide receiver position.
And added bonus with Zachariah Branch, as we just noticed on those highlights, is he can be a game changer in the return game. He's already returned one kickoff and one punt each for a touchdown, 2 touchdown returns already in his career at USC. He is a problem in the open field, no doubt about that. All right, next on the list, LeeAnn, we've got a quarterback that I know you are high on, and this isn't just something that is recent, because everybody's on the Keelan Russell bandwagon at this point to maybe make a move in the quarterback battle at Alabama, but you have been tracking him for quite some time.
This is the kid that, we talk a lot about, but DJ Lagway and Keelan Russell, but prior to their making their respective college decisions, these are kids that I watch. And, I always talk about that separation. These are kids from high school that you just know that they have it. From scouting, recruiting. You see a lot of elite talent in quarterback and some of the guys that we've mentioned, along the way. But Keelan Russell is just one of those kids. I really believe that you can see why the Tide took a chance on him, is investing in him. I know that, Jackson over at our Alabama channel has definitely been talking a lot. I think this is a huge topic, of course, that 3-man quarterback battle that's going in Tuscaloosa right now, heading into the spring. But I believe, I'm going to say that Keelan Russell, I know we got Ty Simpson, of course, going on there. But the Tide is 2 days into practice, and there's just of course, a lot of talk about the potential of him really translating into the spring and really settling. Of course, we know that the Tide brought in Seattle Seahawks, guy Ryan Grubb to coach as their new offensive coordinator. Even though he's been in there in a month, he's been sharing with the media that he's really impressed about what he's been doing and what he's been seeing out of Keelan Russell. Saying he's awesome and unflappable, and he just thinks he's done a really good job, even in the situation, staying in the course. And this is just in 2 practices down in Tuscaloosa. So Grubb is really seeing the potential of Keelan Russell. And this is something that I've said about Keelan Russell since he got the job, freshman year, sophomore year, heading into, into that. It fell in his hands. And if anybody doesn't know, he was a quarterback at Duncanville, and Duncanville, one of the most high profile programs in the state of Texas, producing a lot of top talent. Definitely, much like there is in the SEC, there is a demand to win in Duncanville and in Texas. So Keelan Russell is one of those guys, I believe, that has always had the weight of the world and the pressure to find success. And I think that's what Grubbs has alluded a lot to, even in tough situations, being a young quarterback in this experienced quarterback battle that's going on in Tuscaloosa. Keelan Russell remains calm. He remains collected. But most of all, what we hear is that he finds a way. He works well under pressure, even in situations in practice already. He gets in difficult spots, but once he locks in and he's able to make a decision, he's got a, quick release. He's really whippy. So we're hearing a lot of positive things. Of course, Ty Simpson, the veteran guy who's just really stood behind, waited his turn, a rare story that you hear, and then of course there's Austin Mack, another guy, who's been brought in, was at Washington. under Grubb, for a couple of years, and he followed him and he followed DeBeer to Alabama. So of course there's a lot of storylines that are going on here, Mark, but I'm gonna say it from the jump. I think that Keelan Russell could be the front runner heading in to the spring in Tuscaloosa. I just think that just the way he translates on the field and his decisiveness, I think he's going to be a new spark. And granted, I know that Ty Simpson has waited his turn. And of course, there's that connection, like I said, with Austin Mack, who really knows what, Kalen DeBeer has done and how his offensive work, and could really be that highlighting point because he doesn't, he's already comfortable. He's got that comfort in it. But I do believe that Keelan Russell, going to Tuscaloosa early is going to give it a run. And he may not start day one, but don't be surprised if Alabama gets in a tough spot, that Keelan Russell is going to be the next man up next fall.
It's similar to a situation we just talked about a few minutes ago with Michigan in some situations, in some perspective here, because obviously Ty Simpson has not had the on-field experience of the guys that we talk about at Michigan, but he's, like you just mentioned, LeeAnn, he's been on campus for 3 years. He's been in the system. He knows his teammates. He knows the culture. He knows everything going on. And he's just expected, because he did wait his turn, to be the next in line. And then Keelan Russell may just blow everyone away with his sheer talent. And Austin Mack is no slouch. He was a top 75 recruit coming out of high school. And as you mentioned, for him, there's the edge of the familiarity with the Ryan Grubb offense that he was familiar with from 2 years ago at the University of Washington. And Kalen DeBoer doing a nice job after feeling the heat last year, losing 4 games, of going back to getting his guy, Ryan Grubb, who, of course, helped him to a national championship game with Michael Penix at quarterback. So Alabama's got quite a quarterback battle going on, with 3 inexperienced guys, and we'll see if the high-end talent wins out right out of the gate with Keelan Russell. And Bama has, we talked about this yesterday, one of the tougher non-conference slates with 2 difficult non-conference showdowns, going to Tallahassee to take on Florida State. I know Florida State was 2-10 last year, but I'm just talking about being one of the few teams in the country to have 2 Power 5 conference games in Florida State and Wisconsin a couple of weeks later. So we'll see if they go the safe route or if they just cut loose and give the keys to the young guy, Keelan Russell.
And just before we move on to Keelan Russell's partner in crime, who didn't follow him to Tuscaloosa, the situation in Tuscaloosa, that's not a bad problem to have, because like you said, each one of the guys in that quarterback right room brings a lot of talent. They bring a lot of maturity. Even though Keelan Russell is the rookie, he's the new kid on the block. Believe me, he's anchored a top tier program in Texas, led them to 2 state national champions, in the state of Texas, and has been high up there. Duncanville's one of those. But again, like you said, it's not a bad problem to have, but there's definitely a lot of pressure. And I think that Kalen DeBeer will definitely have to be decisive in who he's going to call when he makes that call heading into the fall. But again, even though Bama has, Florida State, it is still a tough schedule. We saw it all the season. You can't sleep on anybody, conference, non-conference, or conference, because one slip up, and definitely, despite Alabama coming in with a top recruiting class, and definitely heading into the 2026 offseason with this upcoming recruiting class, getting a lot of top players, Kalen DeBeer is not in a comfort zone right now where he can afford to slip up again in Tuscaloosa. He definitely will be in close watch. So every move that he makes this spring, especially on the recruiting trail, building this 2026 class, is definitely going to be watched, because again, even though he was able to rise from the ashes, he's definitely not out of the hot seat if the Crimson Tide takes a dive. So this quarterback battle this spring will definitely be a key component in where the direction of this offense goes heading into the fall.
All right, LeeAnn, here we go with DeCorian Moore, #1 rated wide receiver, just across the board, basically coming out of high school, and he chooses Oregon. And the Oregon situation right now is you've got Tez Johnson. We just saw him at the NFL Combine, along with Trayshawn Holden, a former Alabama transfer to Oregon. Both of those guys gone. Evan Stewart, he was a #1 wide receiver coming out of high school to Texas A&M. played a couple of years with the Aggies. He was at Oregon last year, kind of hit or miss, had an outstanding game against Ohio State in the regular season, but he would disappear for weeks and weeks. And also Dante Moore, of course, the new starting quarterback, most likely. There's a battle at Oregon, but 5-star who originally signed at UCLA coming in to play at Oregon, 1 season under his belt under Dan Lanning, who, by the way, just got a contract extension today announced at $11 million per year. But DeCorian Moore going into a good situation there with the Ducks.
He's another young kid. I don't think that when I saw Duncanville all season long when I was out there, and some of the biggest plays that Keelan Russell was able to make, it was in thanks to his partner in crime, DeCorian Moore. Obviously, Moore not following him to Tuscaloosa to continue that chemistry. But again, with that Oregon wideout room, I think that the young talent that he's going to bring, I mean, there's nothing more than to say he's a kid that when you watch him on film, he pops out. But Mark, when you see him in person, he is just electric. He's clutch. He is I mean, as a freshman, he looks like he's got that talent. Like I said, when you see kids that are of his level, we talk about that translation, but DeCorian Moore, I really believe at Oregon is going to be that guy. He may be a freshman, he may be young, but I think his talent has a ton of upside. And I really like to see where the Ducks are going to utilize him. But again, I think he's going to be an immediate impact player for the Ducks lineup coming into the fall. I believe he's going to be one of the starters. Like I said, electric. There wasn't a time when that Keelan Russell connection and some of the big plays. And if you see there, we talked a lot about it with tight ends, but he's one of the, with him, he extends his body when he's out there making those difficult catches like a tight end would. And I think that that's also something that you want to look for in a wideout, not just your tight ends, that extension. And I think with the schedule, with the way that Oregon and it plays and things like that, again, I think the abilities that he brings in that toolbox is going to be electric. And he's one of those young guys that I can see why Oregon took a chance. I know a lot of people say that there's a lot of young talent, but they got to sit and wait their turn. But my question is, when do you start building on the young talent? When do you start taking a chance? Because at some point you're going to have to. And Oregon, I like what they're doing, taking a chance on DeCorian Moore. I think he's going to have a big spring. He's just electric. He just really knows how to shift his body. That extension, like I said, is just incredible. There's so many big plays that I've seen him make, one-handed catches, just how he stretches out with guys that are almost got 2 or 3 inches on him. He knows how to match up well with even the tougher defensive guys that are put on him. They can't take him down. So excited to see what he's going to do this spring down in Eugene.
Absolutely. And skill guys all over the place on this list. Oh, we got an offensive tackle. So we're going to finish up on the line where you certainly give credit to all sorts of players there on a regular basis. And a guy that chose SMU as one of the best offensive tackles coming out of high school.
Everyone was excited where with Draymond Odoms. They thought that he was going to be a big high-profile, program, but instead he decided to play somewhat closer to home right here. Like I've said it time and time again, Houston produces some of the best athletic talent across the board, and Odoms was that guy. He decided out of Lamar High School here in Houston, he decided to send with SMU. I know there was a lot of projection, with his caliber, but man, this is another guy. The last 3 guys that I wanted to close out this list about our transition to translation were the young guys. And, I really think that SMU, of course, he brought a lot of prestige to SMU, being one of the highest profiled or highest rated recruits that SMU had signed in the history of their program. Again, this is a huge get because you can't get it done without the big guys up front. And he definitely is a big guy up front, about 6'6", 300 pounds. He's got great length, good arms. His wingspan goes on and on and on. And he's got a lot of good mass on him. When we talk about offensive linemen, we think, these big guys, but they still need to be able to move. They still need to be able to react. And what I like about Odom, while he's got a lot of size and mass on him, he still probably could put some weight on and still be able to make those moves. And like I said, he's just got such range when you see him hit the field, even for his size, trying to go down his notes. And then when you see a lineman, they're also, when I talk about receivers, when I talk about running backs, about the fluidity in their feet. And definitely Odom is one of the offensive tackles that I've seen, just with this beautiful fluidity. When you see him, extreme athleticism, he's going to translate at the next level. And he just plays nasty. You know, at the Navy All-American Bowl. Like I said, for those players, especially in the state of Texas, that if you cover Texas football, you know how elite. But getting to see him one-on-one at the Navy All-American Bowl, he just was chaos. He showed up and showed out all week long. And I really think that those live reps really helped him even elevate to earn that star. And another thing we've talked about it at the combine, those big guys up front that are versatile skill players. Of course, we had JJ Pegues, talk a lot about him. But Odom is also one of those guys. There's not really a 7-on-7 circuit, we know, for the big guys up front, those defense and offensive linemen, but that didn't stop Odom for making the 7-on-7 circuit. He did also take a couple reps as linebacker during the 7-on-7 circuit. So again, another versatile player, high level ceiling. I think he's just got a phenomenal future, and I think he's going to bring a lot to that SMU line. And I think this was a huge get, and he's going to be exciting to see to see this spring. Again, he's going into a situation where SMU is pretty set on that offensive line. But again, I think he's going to separate himself this spring and really show that even in his youthness, that he brings a lot of high caliber talent that SMU line definitely will recognize. And don't be surprised if we see him get a couple snaps in early on for the Mustangs.
All right, folks, we are on the move I know it's not Tuesday, but every Tuesday.
It's Thursday.
This is an exception. So we moved to Thursday this week, typically on Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. You know what? That's a good reason why you subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. So this week on Thursday, but typically on Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And we will see you for Ole Miss live here in a few minutes as well over in the Ole Miss channel. But please subscribe here, and we will keep you updated on transfer portal moves as we get into spring. And then obviously it's going to open back up right after spring practice. And of course, recruiting never stops. All right, LeeAnn, we talked about Bill Belichick in North Carolina a few weeks ago and went in depth on what that all could look like and the transition from the NFL to college football and how much the game has changed on the collegiate level and looks like the NFL these days and might be a perfect fit for him. And that general manager component to what all these programs have to do now. And you've got some thoughts about Bill Belichick and him going after, we mentioned and you highlighted some of the under the radar guys he went for initially, even going to the Ivy League. But now he's going after some big fish on the high school level.
Well, we're back to those recruiting rumblings, of course. Camp season's in full swing, 7-on-7's in full swing. And of course, even in the dead period, quiet period, now that visits are back on college campus, we'll see a lot of guys. It's going to be a big weekend in Chapel Hill, and an even bigger, big weekend for Bill Belichick and his staff down there, hosting a lot of key recruits. But two guys, not one, but two blue chip edge rushers are going to be heading to Chapel Hill this weekend. Bill Belichick, we knew when he took the reins that he was going to take a unique approach. Of course, when he hit to the transfer portal, he was not going for the top tier guys. He was looking to fill voids, players that brought maturity, instant impact players, even recruiting in the lacrosse field. Bill Belichick, when everybody's running away from the fire, Bill Belichick is going to be running towards the fire. But when it comes to the high school football recruiting, he's going for the big guys, the top blue chip players. And it could very well be not a double hit for edge rushers in Chapel Hill this weekend. First, starting off with the one guy that he's just 5-star, oozes with talent. He's the number 2 edge behind Maryland commit Zion Ali, who we've talked a lot about. Cardo Meadows, not too far off the road over from Gonzaga at DC, already about 6'6.5". man, this kid, when you watch him on film, I hope I have an opportunity to see him in person. But man, he jumps out on film, Mark. He's a really rangy edge. He's just got a rare combination with his when it comes to his skill set, from his movement to his frame. He's just physically also impressive for this 2026 class. It's no question when you watch his film why he's just so top of the line, and definitely Bill Belichick is going to do everything. He'll be heading down to Chapel Hill for a visit this weekend. Again, his size and his frame are just extremely impressive. He brings a lot of physicality, athleticism. He's just effective when it comes to being an edge setter. And of course, we always say that Bill Belichick likes those multi-sported, those guys that can play. And he's also a pretty successful high school basketball player. So again, he's got elite size, frame, but his movement and his skills, obviously with his basketball background, are going to bring a lot. So look for him to be down in Chapel Hill this weekend. Bill Belichick looking to eke him as possibly, at least get lucky with one edge rusher.
Absolutely. And you're also high on a guy that is on the rise. He's on your on the rise list, and we're talking about one Landon Barnes.
Well, before we go to Landon Barnes, I just have to go back because we forgot the second edge rusher. That was on me because I followed through. The number one edge rusher in the country. He's number 5 on the On3 rankings, out of Princeton, New Jersey. So Bill Belichick, like I said, looking at some of those elite East Coast players, and he is also set to visit is Luke Waffles, another big guy, 6'6", 245 frame. This is another kid that just has a lot in his toolbox. Even though we don't hear a lot about him here down south, he's definitely making huge moves and impact at the Hun School out in Princeton, New Jersey. Really highly developed talent coming out of the East Coast that Bill Belichick is really high on. He's going to be a kid that, again, will translate, I believe, at the next level. He's got super speed. He's very powerful, really physical finisher. And again, going back to Bill Belichick, really liking those athlete kind of style guys. And Waffles definitely no different. Not only does he play football, he runs track, and he also is a basketball player. He will be in Chapel Hill this weekend, of course. So Bill Belichick looking to really create some Bill buzz over in the Chapel Hill, but not more than be just the hype. So it could be a big, huge recruiting weekend if they could possibly land 2 of the best edge rushers in the country right now in 2026, Luke Waffle, and also in 2026, Carter Meadows. So a big weekend, a recruiting weekend down in Chapel Hill for Bill Belichick.
The offensive linemen get sometimes that pancake. That became a stat a long time ago. I don't know what could possibly be made up on the other side of the football for the waffle analogy there, but we'll have somebody else work on that. Now I get my take on Landon Barnes.
Now you do, and we are back on the Duncanville train again. If you don't know about Duncanville football, and probably one of the best places to get developed if you're here in the state of Texas. Now, it is not in the Houston area; it is the DFW. But what we talk about, this is a kid that I've had the opportunity to watch this past season live and in the flesh as well as in the tape. He's really been on the rise. And again, a lot of these kids outside that don't get the opportunity to be seen by the national scouts really make their footing. And this is why this off season, they are definitely on the move, because these 7-on-7 camps, these Under Armour camps and combines really help elevate them. And Landon Barnes is one of those guys that really has had this talent. He did it. I said the same with Keelan Russell. When Keelan Russell, everybody got on the bandwagon. Where did this talent come from? He's always had it, just never really had an opportunity to showcase. But at the Under Armour Dallas, Landon Barnes was already a 4-star heading in, but he really just caught the eyes of so many, and he's definitely going to be one to watch. 6'4", 245 pounds. I mean, already building up a nice offer sheet. Recently, Ohio State, of course, and LSU putting down the offers after that Under Armour camp a couple weeks ago. He's really a star on the rise and on the move. I think he's just one of those kids that I saw all week, all season long be consistent, and he produces when and as consistent. And those are two things we talk a lot about it, that some of these elite kids, we see flashes of it, but they lack that consistency. Landon Barnes is not one of those kids. He's all, like I said, some of the offers he's looking at is Georgia, Oregon, Arizona State, of course, Ole Miss jumping in there, hoping to keep that Texas pipeline going. Of course, we'll talk a little bit more about how they're keeping that going. For Ole Miss with Ruby, Mark, and myself here. So tune into that Ole Miss live show here in just a few minutes. He's another edge rusher that just jumps off the page, super explosive. He's got a quick first step. Really versatile. And again, I think he's going to be one of those players that, even though he is young and elite and comes from an elite program in Texas high school football, he's learned to separate himself. But I think what makes him one of the most valuable players outside of his talent is his consistency. And he still has not reached the ceilings. A lot of upside with this kid. We will definitely be watching him, and hopefully we'll get out to Duncanville sometime this spring to be able to catch him in action. But again, if you guys don't already know his name, Landon Barnes, edge out of Duncanville, going to have a promising and bright spring. Again, he's an explosive player, impact player. He just knows how to maneuver and just navigate through offenses and pick them apart. So again, another edge rusher. Talked a lot about the edge rushers. Again, they were always vital to the defense, but I think this season, especially with the young guys, a lot of the young edge rushers are really trying to make a move when it comes to getting seen in some of these bigger programs. So again, Landon Barnes out of Duncanville is on the rise, and I look to see and hopefully bring him on the show so we can talk more about his recruitment. But definitely a lot of schools interested in his promising talent.
On the move. That's what we do each and every, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time, typically. And we ask that you would lock it in with us here at the Voice of College Football. LeeAnn Herring doing an outstanding job. This is her intel. I just copy off of her and just kind of fill in the blanks a little bit here and there. So I'm just along for the ride, just like the rest of you. We can all learn from LeeAnn and her scouting and everything that she provides here at the Voice of College Football. And LeeAnn, we always appreciate it. And it's always a fun time to get together. But we're not done. We got more work to do today. We are moving on to the Ole Miss show.
We are moving on to the Ole Miss show. We don't have a lot of recruiting rumblings, but make sure you guys tune in. And I know that if you guys haven't had a chance to follow us, like I say, if you can't catch us on the live show, you can definitely replay us here when you like and subscribe to the channel. But now we're offered across all our shows, are offered on your favorite audio platform. So when you're driving, or put on that Bluetooth and listen to us on Spotify, get up on all the latest recruiting rumblings. So again, there's no off season, but looking forward to the spring, hitting some practices on the high school circuit, and we'll have a busy March coming up. Of course, we will be heading into OT 7-on-7, be taking over Dallas, not this week, but the next week. So looking forward to bringing a lot of interviews and firsthand information with some of these guys, including some of your favorite guys in the upcoming week. So glad to always be on the move, but make sure you guys tune in next week.